Chapter 21. Target. The Heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Irene Editor. Boss, are the items ready? They are done. They do not look very good due to the lack of time, but do not worry, they are of good quality and there will not be any problems. Take a look. AI Hui conveniently picked up an item, carefully examined it, and was satisfied. Although it did not look very refined, the blacksmith had pretty good skills, and the workmanship was very solid. As long as the items were sturdy and reliable, they were good enough for AI Hui. He never bothered with aesthetics. He packed his items and prepared to leave. Sensing a presence nearby, he was immediately on guard. Upon noticing the weakness of the footsteps, AI Hui relaxed. This was not the wilderness, he reminded himself. Suddenly, he felt something on his shoulder. A hand. His hair stood on end and he forgot his own reminder as his body reacted instinctively. He did not dodge. Instead, he arched his back and closed in on the chest of this unknown threat. Exerting forcefully from his legs, AI Hui's body became like a cannonball as it powerfully shot backward. AI Hui was in a highly agitated state, so when he felt someone touching him, he launched the arching fish back, a technique he had been practicing for a whole week. He did it brazenly and without any hesitation. Like a ferocious fish that leaped out of the water with a powerful jerk of its arching back, his technique was executed at full power. Like a deluge breaking through a dam, the violent, surging force was abruptly unleashed. Boom! It was on point. Immediately, AI Hui knew his arching fish back was completely on target. He felt his opponent fly back without any attempt to resist. It was like he had struck a feather-light sandbag. He felt a little weird that the opponent made no sound. Enemies that received such a counterattack or hit would usually scream miserably, like in the bamboo stick incident. Boom! A heavy object fell onto the ground. Not even withstanding a single blow. AI Hui was puzzled, but he suddenly realized what he had done. An ominous feeling rose in his heart as he turned around and saw a motionless fellow lying down on his stomach. AI Hui was shocked and annoyed with himself. Did he not just remind himself that this was not the wilderness? Why did he attack without thinking? Lying on the ground after a single, arching fish back. How weak was this fellow? AI Hui ran over while mumbling, "Hey, hey, hey, are you okay?" Turning this fellow over, AI Hui saw his face clearly and was startled. Was this not that fellow, Duan? Bangwan something. AI Hui remembered thinking it was a strange name and did not understand why anyone would use it. Or did he recall wrongly? How was it possible for the evening to be carried with both hands? Or was it actually Xuanhuan instead? Bangwan, are you okay? AI Hui had knocked him unconscious. AI Hui felt slight remorse. He had been too aggressive. Although this fellow was unreasonable, full of arrogance, and was unfriendly toward him, AI Hui believed he would not go so far as to attack him. Again, he thought about how he had just knocked out his fellow classmate. Too aggressive. Too aggressive. While reflecting upon himself, AI Hui picked Xuanhuan up and slung him over his shoulder. He then collected his items before rushing back to the training hall. The moment he reached the training hall, he started to yell for his neighbor, Lu Lan. Lu Lan. Soon after, a lump of sand seeped out from within the ground and metamorphosed into a humanoid form. Lu Lan was quite curious. AI Hui, what happened? I injured a classmate by accident. Without concealing, AI Hui told the truth and felt his face burning. In the wilderness, someone who mistakenly injured a fellow teammate would be marginalized. AI Hui had not expected to make such a ridiculous error. Hold on. That fellow was not his teammate. AI Hui's guilt was erased immediately. In a rush, AI Hui asked, Lu Lan, you know medicine right? Help me take a look at him. No problem, Lu Lan readily agreed. A brilliant yellow ray of light shone from his eyes onto the unconscious Xuanhuan. This was the second time Ai Hui had seen Lu's eyes light up. Unlike the previous time, he was just a bystander this time and did not feel uncomfortable, but he still found it unbelievable. Most of the medical practitioners whom he had met were wood elementalists. Possessing a good understanding of life and nourishment, they were naturals when it came to helping the dying and healing the injured. It was extremely rare to find a sand puppet who knew medicine. Sand puppets could barely tap into wood elemental energy, but this very energy still had healing abilities. Ai Hui realized his ignorance. An external blow caused him to lose consciousness. He has a cold, so his body is in a weakened state. This does not look good, Lu Lan concluded quickly. Ai Hui felt even more guilty. Although they were not teammates, he really should not have knocked this fellow down, especially when he was ill. Ai Hui immediately asked, "What should we do now?" "The easier method would be to recuperate," Lu Lan responded. "His body's condition is not bad to begin with. A few days of rest would do the trick." "That's good." Ai Hui breathed a sigh of relief but quickly asked, "How many days? Is there a quicker solution?" Ai Hui was sensitive to time. Upon hearing "a few days," he creased his brows involuntarily. A few days of time. That was going to hold up several trainings. Lu Lan nodded. But it would be more troublesome. Ai Hui hastily replied, "That's not a problem, go on." He already opened up the 4 palaces of his limbs and should not fall sick easily. Perhaps he had been suffering from pent-up frustrations. The rage within his heart inhibited the 4 palaces, allowing diseases to invade and caused a cold. However, he has a higher than average immune system. He will naturally recover when the palaces are reactivated and his suppressed anger is cleared. Ai Hui was surprised by Lu Lan's composure and confident tone. After recovering from his daze, he inquired, "How do we do that?" "Pat on his skin with elemental energy, starting from his limbs' palaces. Move up to his heart, and clear the anger within it." "Okay," Ai Hui said plainly. Without any delay, he peeled off Xuanhuan's clothes in a professional manner. Saving a life was like putting out a fire. On the battlefield, there simply was no time to overthink. Scanning across this fellow's pale body, Ai Hui clicked his tongue and made a comment about how this skin resembled that of a freshly slaughtered, shaved, and boiled pig. Pat, pat, pat. Ai Hui started slapping lightly and continuously with both hands. Fortunately, his elemental energy had improved or else he would not have been able to carry on. He thought about how he was saving a sum from the medical fee and immediately felt less tired. I'll hit. I'll hit. I'll hit, hit, hit. Last one. Target. The heart. Ai Hui slapped at Xuanhuan's heart area with great precision using the energy he had left in his palms. Ha, mission accomplished. Although Ai Hui had greater stamina than most, he was gasping and breathless at this point. He used both arms to support his body as he panted heavily. Xuanhuan's body jolted, then he slowly opened his eyes. Their eyes met, and the air around them froze. Chapter 22. Xuanhuan's roar. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. TYZ Editor. At that moment when Xuanhuan opened his eyes, one would not know how to describe what he was thinking. In reality, his mind was blank. His entire body was shivering due to the cold while a guy was pressing against his chest with both arms and panting heavily. He could not see the guy's face clearly. As his head buzzed, his mind blanked out as if he was heavily punched in the side of the head. Ai Hui noticed that Xuanhuan's eyes were open, however, his pupils seemed to be disorganized. Although he had seen a lot of grisly scenes in his life, Ai Hui panicked for a moment. When he first entered the wilderness, there was a total of 2,000 laborers. In the end, only 2 survived. The rest were forever buried in the muddy ground of the wilderness. Ai Hui witnessed how they fell into pools of their own blood firsthand. He saw how their eye pupils dilated until life disappeared from them. Lu Lan, what's wrong with him? Hey buddy, wake up. Are you okay? Don't fall asleep. Ai Hui asked while slapping Xuanhuan's face. Lu Lan was somewhat puzzled at the scene before him. He then commented naively, he's okay. Smack smack smack. Ai Hui slapped Xuanhuan's face with force. Xuanhuan's unfocused eyes gradually regained clarity. His vision slowly recovered and the glazed look on his face disappeared. When he clearly saw the face of the person before him, his face turned blank. Wasn't this guy that wretched bastard? Wasn't this person the useless guy who skipped lessons, refused to train, held the entire class back, and had poor aptitude? Wasn't he the main culprit who caused him to fall ill, wasted his time, and tarnished his reputation as a genius? Fury gushed through his head and hatred filled his mind. Xuanhuan sat up abruptly, wanting to rip this hateful fellow into 1,000 pieces. Suddenly, his body froze. Trembling. His entire body was trembling in the cold. His facial expression froze and his body froze. After a while, he lowered his head in shock. He was only wearing his underpants. His thighs and arms were covered with bright red palm prints, contrasting greatly with the rest of his pale white body. Oh! No! Fear appeared instantly in his widened eyes. What had this bastard done to him? Once again, Xuanhuan's mind was blank. He subconsciously grabbed the clothes beside him and scuttled out of the training hall. Ai Hui and Lu Lan looked confusedly at the door. It seems that he has recovered. Lu Lan, you're really awesome. Ai Hui's voice was filled with joy. He could finally go back to training. Even though there was a short period of time when Lu Lan did not understand what was wrong with him, Lu Lan can see that he has recovered now. Upon hearing Ai Hui's compliment, Lu Lan was beaming with joy as well. Thank you, Lu Lan. I shall go to train now. Goodbye, Ai Hui. Xuanhuan walked on the street as a rustling, cold breeze blew against his chest. He was completely filled with despair. He did not dare to recall the scene just now or what had happened after he was knocked out. To him, this was the darkest moment in his life. After a while, Xuanhuan gradually calmed down from the horror. Suddenly, he realized that he had recovered fully from his cold. He was a unique individual that could not be matched by ordinary people. After all, he came from an aristocratic family and had an outstanding aptitude that was meticulously nurtured by his family. After he regained his composure, he thought of the reddish palm prints on his limbs and roughly understood how he recovered from his illness. Xuanhuan was somewhat surprised. How could trash like Ai Hui know such a method? Even an experienced and knowledgeable individual like himself needed to think for a long time before coming up with such an idea. Ai Hui used such an unorthodox method to cure his flu in the time that it would take for others just to think of this approach. One must note that having a lot of knowledge was one thing, but putting that knowledge to practical use was quite another. Perhaps this fellow was not as inferior as he thought. A metal elementalist that specialized in healing. Even though this seemed weird, this type of metal elementalist had appeared before in the history of the Avalon of Five Elements. Perhaps he did underestimate Ai Hui. After all, it was impossible to enter the induction ground with that fellow's inferior aptitude. He might have some other special talents, so the induction ground could have made him an exception. After calming down and determining how his opponent cured his cold, Xuanhuan did not really care about what had just happened. However, when he thought of being knocked by such a weak individual, his face darkened. Even though he could come up with excuses, such as he was sick, he was exhausted, or his opponent's attack was too sudden, he still could not accept the fact that he was knocked out by a garbage classmate. It was too humiliating. Especially once he thought of the teacher's request, his face reddened. The teacher wanted him to guide the trash to success, yet he was knocked out by such trash. Yes, he could come up with many reasons. He was far too careless and underestimated his opponent. He let anger get the better of him. His body was so weak that he caught a cold just by standing in the wind. His stamina was so low that a night of training left him completely drained. However, there was not a single reason that Xuanhuan could accept. He was a genius. Geniuses do things that others can't do. How could he compare himself to the ordinary people? That was slacking. That was failure. Xuanhuan, you are indeed an embarrassment. Xuanhuan cursed himself in his heart. Suddenly, he noticed people on the street were pointing fingers and mocking him. Most of them were girls. As he walked past these girls, they covered their mouths and whispered about him. No, it's not right. No matter where he went, Xuanhuan had never had such an experience in his life before. Could it be that there was dirt on his face? As he walked past a weapon shop, he stopped in his tracks. He picked up a shiny, polished sword, used its blade as a mirror. He was dumbfounded. Who was this guy whose face was swollen like a pig head? A thought flashed across his mind. A blurry image intruded into his mind without any warning. A blurry figure seemed to be yelling something at him while slapping his face forcefully with both his hands in quick succession. The figure appeared to be continuously slapping him. Smack, smack, smack. Loud and crisp smacking sounds. His face was like a bun that was being steamed. It inflated slowly and then. The face in his mind merged together with the image displayed on the reflection of the blade. Xuanhuan's lips quivered while his hand that gripped the sword trembled. Like a volcanic eruption, he clenched his teeth, let out a roar, and almost tore down the roof of the weapon shop. Ai Hui, I will rip you into pieces. Chapter 23. The Backless Armor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. TYZ Editor. X as Xuanhuan's roar faded into the wind, Ai Hui never even heard a whisper. If he remembered anything from that incident, it was most likely the part where he recalled the time he spent in the wilderness. Outside the suspending golden pagoda, custom-made pieces of armor were scattered all over the ground. Ai Hui picked them up and equipped them piece by piece. This was his custom-made armor. Although everything was made out of steel, the appearance was simple and unrefined without any etched designs due to the lack of time spent on the construction. The helmet looked like an inverted bucket, simply having two slits that served as eye holes. The front torso was protected by a piece of steel plate while the rest of the body parts were crudely made. Unexpectedly, the joints were rather flexible, displaying the skillfulness of the blacksmith who forged it. The most peculiar part of the armor was its back. The entire dorsal section of this suit of armor was uncovered. This backless armor was specially prepared by Ai Hui for his training in the suspending golden pagoda. After wearing the full set of armor, Ai Hui moved around to test his mobility. It felt pretty good. Since Ai Hui had repeatedly stressed to the blacksmith to make it firm and solid, the armor was exceptionally sturdy and weighed around 100 kilograms. Even though Ai Hui was used to hauling heavy loads in the wilderness, he was still exhausted from carrying the armor to the suspending golden pagoda. Luckily, Ai Hui's body was used to long-term, arduous jobs, and his physique was rather strong. However, after donning the armor, he could still feel that his movements were somewhat restricted. After fastening his armor, the neatly dressed Ai Hui entered the suspending golden pagoda once more. Clang, clang, clang. The collision between Ai Hui's armor and the walls of the pagoda was much more spectacular than before. Every crash sent sparks flying everywhere and the impacts were several times louder than before, creating ringing echoes in Ai Hui's brain. After a while, AI Hui acclimated to the deafening clashing sounds and started to experience the benefits of wearing the backless armor. The metal elemental energy within the metal wind was unable to penetrate AI Hui's armor, allowing all of the needle-piercing pain to converge on his back. AI Hui rallied himself. He had spent a lot of time on the backless armor, and he derived this idea from the iron chain. Since the metal wind could not destroy the chain, it implied that the metal wind would not be able to destroy the steel armor either. This improved training method proved that his conjecture was correct, and nothing motivated AI Hui more than this discovery. When AI Hui felt the pain in his back had reached his limit, he grabbed the iron chain and pulled himself out. After exiting, AI Hui was too lazy to take off the armor and went straight to his usual practice of executing the arching fish back on the external wall. Clang! From the first collision, AI Hui could feel the difference. His back felt as if it was going to fracture, requiring him to rest for a good 5 minutes before his strength recovered. A bitter smile appeared on his face. The dissipating effect of the metal elemental energy was superb and a lot better than its power. However, with the addition of the armor, the arching fish back's overall strength increased dramatically and caused some light bruises to appear on back muscles. The arching fish back's strength might be great, but this improvement in strength was due to the armor. Looking at it from an overall perspective, the power of the technique itself had actually decreased dramatically, due to the weight of the armor, even though the power released might be strong and ferocious, but it was somewhat scattered instead of focused. Upon feeling that he had recovered his strength, AI Hui contemplated for a while before he began to practice the arching fish back again. Clang! This time around, AI Hui shot forward and smashed onto the ground with a boom, filling the air with dirt and dust. As the cloud of debris dispersed, AI Hui struggled to stand up. Spitting out the dirt in his mouth, he strode towards the suspending golden pagoda with raging determination in his heart. Clang clang clang. A tin can man collided tirelessly against the iron pagoda. The nightfall arrived as stars rose over the dome of the night sky. It seemed like the night breeze had scattered resplendent stars all over the heavens. Shortly after, the horizon was splashed with cyan skies while the clouds were dyed orange. The first glimmer of the rising sun shined upon the sleeping tin man propped against the wall of the pagoda. Glittering dewdrops coalesced on his metal armor. Soon, the scorching sun hung high above in the sky, causing the perspiration within the tin man to boil and steam. Day by day, time gradually passed. Intense, continuous, and monotonous training posed a great challenge to the psyche. When his exhaustion hit the limit, AI Hui plopped down on his butt to sit. He was too lazy to take off the armor, so he only took off his helmet. It was taxing to wear this suit for a long period. Ever since he first put on the backless armor, even when he was sleeping or having his meals, he had not taken it off. His facial expression was slightly distracted, which had always been the case whenever he trained up to his limit. After sitting for around 20 minutes, some vitality finally returned to his absent-minded face as he began to return to his senses. Upon regaining his awareness, AI Hui immediately felt a powerful stab of hunger in his stomach. He quickly took out a flatbread from his bag. AI Hui did not mind the dryness and hardness of bread, finishing it in an instant. He reached into the bag once more, but failed to grab anything this time around. No more. He was momentarily stunned. After recovering, he flipped the bag over and searched through it thoroughly, but the bag was empty. How long had it been? He could not remember, but he knew it was time to go back. As he prepared to leave, he paused for a moment before removing the armor from his body and hid it nearby. Since this thing was not worth much, no one would covet it. After he replenished his rations, he would be back shortly. Without the armor, he could afford to bring more rations. After removing the armor, AI Hui felt as nimble as a swallow. It was as if he stepped into a sea of cotton, moving felt light and airy. The spirited AI Hui surged forward and was shocked by his speed. Immediately, his eyes lit up. It turned out that wearing the backless armor non-stop while training produced such a benefit. Without a word, he broke into a run and ran in the direction of Central Pine City. Li Wei had a short stature, and he wore a very plain green garment. Unlike Zhou Xiaoxi, who had a robust build, Li Wei appeared scholarly and looked like the teachers in school. He strolled through the street in high spirits. Very few people knew that he studied in Central Pine City 15 years ago. Nonetheless, when he was free, he would come back to visit his old haunts. Upon seeing the familiar yet modified landscape, he reminisced about the good old times. Numerous vague memories flashed through his mind. The surrounding scenery changed as he strolled idly through the street. He knew for a fact that he had been to this place before, but he was currently unsure of his exact location. After all, he had not been to this place in 15 years. He did not realize where he was until a towering pagoda appeared in his line of sight. It was the suspending golden pagoda. Immediately, Li Wei became excited, and his walking pace increased subconsciously. The suspending golden pagoda was a place where he frequently trained in the past. He remembered he even wrote a book just to depict his experience in the suspending golden pagoda. The number of people here was still so scant. He could not help but heave a rueful sigh. It was just like 15 years ago. The suspending golden pagoda had never been a popular training site. In the past, he chose the suspending golden pagoda as his main training ground because it was much quieter than the other places. After 15 years, the suspending golden pagoda remained the same without many changes. He knew as long as the metal wind continued to blow in the tower, the suspending golden pagoda would not collapse. Li Wei walked up the flight of stairs. He was extremely familiar with everything here. He continued forward while feeling the wall of the pagoda with his hands. Numerous memories of the days and nights he spent there cascaded through his mind. A nostalgic smile appeared on his face. His hands suddenly stopped. Startled, he let out a soft yelp upon noticing what his hands had touched. Chapter 24. Friends, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Irene Editor. Li Wei had trained in the suspending golden pagoda for 3 whole years, so he was intimately familiar with its layout. The sensation he felt from his hands. Something was wrong. There seemed to be an indentation in the tower wall. He moved closer to inspect. There was indeed a dent, and it was a big one. Li Wei was utterly shocked. He knew how tough the walls were. After 1,000 years of constant metal wind flow, the tower's exterior had completely metallized. It became extremely solid, something common metal could not compare to. Li Wei tested the hardness of the pagoda wall and found it to be the same as before. Nothing had changed. The big dent he saw before him was clearly not caused by a natural process. Could it be that a formidable dire beast had smashed against it? Sure enough, he spotted several signs around him that indicated something had trampled through. Judging from the size, the beast must have been large. He imagined in his head a possible scenario. An enormous dire beast went crazy and it used its head to collide against the pagoda wall. The dent was created, but the creature simultaneously ricocheted and fell far away due to the forceful impact. He found a few traces of upturned soil. Oh, it appeared that the wild beast had done this more than once. It looked like this wild beast had brute force, but not brains. Li Wei, believing that he had found a logical reason, shelved this question. He would notify the school to warn students about the appearance of a ferocious and possibly wandering beast. He was not too nervous since such a foolish wild beast would not be very threatening. Plus, students who dared to visit this pagoda had probably opened at least 2 palaces. A strong, but brainless wild beast would not threaten their safety. If one, who had already activated 2 palaces, failed to handle such a beast, he or she deserved to die, and Li Wei felt no sympathy. He loitered around for an extended duration before turning to leave. Vanguard Training Hall. AI Hui looked at the piping hot soup before him and licked his lips. The appetizing aroma was too much to handle and he could not wait to dig in. He was uncertain about the effectiveness of this bone-benefiting soup, but just smelling it was enough to drive him crazy. AI Hui admired Lu Lan's cooking skill. He believed if Lu Lan were to open up a soup stall, business would flourish. Whether it was at the swordsman school or the wilderness, AI Hui was forced to prepare his own meals. Practice made perfect, so he soon became a relatively good cook and believed his culinary skills were pretty decent. Compared to Lu Lan, however, his skills were far inferior. It was quite odd for a sand puppet to be an expert at preparing soup. AI Hui had lost track of the number of times that he puzzled over these quirks that Lu Lan had as a sand puppet, and he quickly discarded these thoughts as the soup stole all of his focus and attention. Drink it while it's hot since it's more effective this way, Lu Lan reminded him as he delivered the soup. AI Hui gingerly took the bowl from Lu Lan's hands, as if he was receiving a one-of-a-kind treasure. His final 40,000 yuan was spent on this bowl of soup. AI Hui still could not believe that he had actually taken out all of his fortune to splurge on something like this. Such extravagant conduct. Licking his lips once more, he raised the bowl up to his mouth and gulped it down. The seemingly steaming hot broth was not as scalding as he had imagined. It was exceptionally delicious. The umami of the bones and meat had been brought out perfectly. Coupled with the fresh fragrance of the herbs, the soup had an indescribably well-balanced and harmonious taste. Its viscous, gelatinous texture seemed to slide down his throat. AI Hui did not stop drinking. It was as if he was pouring the soup down his throat without pause. It was simply too tasty. Lu Lan, go sell some soup. After the last dregs entered his mouth, he licked the bowl clean, before setting it down and opening his eyes wide. An inexpressible warmth surged upwards from the soles of his feet toward his heart, enveloping his whole body in a matter of seconds. The threads of warmth entered his bones and his face turned red, as if he was drunk. He felt a sensation of burning up. Quickly start training, AI Hui. Spread the medicinal energy, Lu Lan reminded. Upon hearing this, AI Hui altered his posture and started to punch and kick. Lu Lan's eyes flickered. Many moves were familiar since AI Hui had coached him previously. The moves were scattered and mostly simple, not at all gaudy or complicated. Yet, when AI Hui used them, they felt completely different. Sharp, fierce, murderous. It was as if a wild, ferocious, blood-thirsty beast took over his body. Lu Lan envied AI Hui a little. He was a useless sand puppet that could not even fight. He knew few who were like him. Sand puppets were war machines who saved their companion's life in times of danger. But him. He only knew how to clean the rooms, tidy the garden, cook, and perform other such chores. He did not understand why Master Xiao had made him this way. Maybe Master Xiao only needed this kind of sand puppet, Lu Lan thought. Previously Lu Lan had no neighbors, and no one talked to him either, except for the grocer. Oh, but that was work-related. AI Hui was the first person he had gotten acquainted with outside of work. We should be considered friends by now, Lu Lan reckoned. Being able to assist AI Hui made him happy. Was that not the reason why sand puppets existed? To help people. AI Hui, who was engrossed in his training, felt a ball of fire ignite within his body that made him sweat profusely. The moves which previously required a huge consumption of energy were less strenuous now. This was especially so for the arching fish back. He performed it and could sense that the power of his back had increased significantly. This improvement was even larger than the previous trainings. Bit by bit, time passed. The fluctuations within his body settled down, and AI Hui finally stopped his training. His pupils were as bright as the stars, and he was soaked in sweat. However, he did not feel tired at all. In fact, he felt completely energized. The intensity of his previous training session had been very high, and the multiple, arching fish back, moves he had practiced against the pagoda wall carried unmatched power. Each time, the same amount of force would rebound and strike his body. He had sustained injuries of differing severity in many parts of his body. The metal elemental energy that his body had absorbed was as sharp as a blade and had no nourishing effect on his flesh at all. Now, his internal injuries had disappeared. Ai Hui instantly felt that his 40,000 yuan was money well spent. He was not short-sighted and was well aware that such internal damage carried hidden danger. Instead, he was simply used to being poor, and he had more pressing concerns to tackle. What caused Ai Hui greater surprise was the fact that his elemental energy had clearly expanded. It turned out that the previously unabsorbed threads of elemental energy that remained in his body were now completely digested into his flesh. Lu Lan, thank you. Ai Hui said sincerely. He did fork out the money to buy the ingredients, but Lu Lan was the one who stewed the soup. Where else could he find such an amazing sand puppet? You're welcome. All of a sudden Lu Lan recalled an earlier thought and blurted out, Ai Hui, are we friends? Friends. Ai Hui was stunned for a bit. He answered seriously and solemnly, of course. Lu Lan was overjoyed. Chapter 25. How kind. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Irene Editor. Li says he drank the soup, he was so happy that he seemed to hear bells chiming softly. Simultaneously, alarm bells clanged obnoxiously because he had just gone broke. The 40,000 yuan he had left now settled heavily in his stomach. He had to stop his training plans for now. In a few days' time, he would not even have money for food with starvation looming in the future. Lu Lan, any ideas on how I can earn some money? Ai Hui asked with some distress. Earn money. Lu Lan stared blankly. It was the first time someone had questioned him on this subject, leading him to ask, you're out of money? Yes, it's all gone. Ai Hui pondered as he spoke. If not for the 50,000 from that blind battle, I would really have starved. Blind battle. Lu Lan's eyes brightened. You're good at blind battles. Then go participate in more blind battles. How can there be a blind battle every day? Ai Hui shook his head and felt a brief pang of guilt. The incident resurfaced in his brain, leaving a weakened yet distinct sensation on his fingertips. Ai Hui inwardly sighed. Having overly strong fighting instincts had its downsides, he could clearly remember every single detail of that particular battle. And he had no desire to remember such an embarrassing incident. Yes, there is. Lu Lan raised his index finger with sparkling eyes. Ai Hui was taken aback. Had the Shi clan training hall organized another blind battle? It was certainly possible, Ai Hui thought as he mulled it over. Blind battles were pretty interesting, and training halls would not give them up so easily. But what is this awkwardness I'm feeling? A pang of hunger snapped him out of it before Ai Hui realized he was being senseless. What awkwardness, what embarrassment. These thoughts vanished like smoke into thin air. He asked hastily, where? Let's go. No one could stop him from making money. He would kill God and Buddha if he had to. Girl. You better pray you won't run into me. A cold light flashed through his half-lidded eyes, his heart as hard as steel. Because you're out of luck if we meet. Ai Hui, with his murderous expression, raised his head and walked out like a heroic warrior ready for battle. Xuanhuan surveyed the central pine city, lost in thought. In the past, this small city had been nameless to her, but now she kept returning to it whenever she got a break. It was here that she experienced her biggest setback and her most painful failure. She would never, ever forget, not in this lifetime. She clenched her teeth. Her thoughts shifted to her blind battle strategy and wondered how it was progressing. She held high hopes for this operation. Although she was unprepared, and her skills were not enough to defeat that terrifying enemy of hers, she hoped only to find hints to help her identify that bastard. Perhaps there would be good news today. She was slightly expectant after hearing that the training hall had specially implemented many unique rules involving the blind battle. That fellow was an expert in blind battling, so how could he possibly not be moved to participate in such an interesting event? If she were him, she would not be able to resist entering this upcoming competition. If I find any clues, you are dead. A bone-chilling, murderous look flashed across Xuanhuan's icy face. Meanwhile, in the garden, a fire cloud descended slowly with Uncle Yongjing waiting for her. She jumped onto the fire cloud and said, "It's been hard on you, Uncle. How is our plan coming along? Any progress?" Yongjing's expression was a little odd, and Xuanhuan immediately knew something was wrong upon seeing it. She bluntly asked, "What happened?" Xuanhuan knew something was wrong upon seeing his face. She asked bluntly, "What's up?" Yongjing smiled bitterly. "Go out and you will see, miss." Without further ado, Xuanhuan left the training hall. Ai Hui followed behind Lu Lan, slightly shocked. "Lu Lan, I didn't know you were familiar with this area." Lu Lan explained, "It's because I have to buy groceries, wine, and ingredients. Everything Master Xiao needs, I buy." Lu Lan's owner remained a mystery to Ai Hui. He never knew of a wood elementalist who could create a sand puppet like Lu Lan. With curiosity, he asked, "He doesn't go out at all?" Lu Lan replied, "Master Xiao's leg is not in a good condition. Plus, he does not like going out or meeting people. Otherwise, you would have received an invitation to visit." Only then did Ai Hui realize the reason why Lu Lan was only competent in life skills. There was no danger within induction ground, and Master Xiao's legs were weak, which meant that he required more assistance in his everyday life. All of a sudden, Ai Hui stopped in his tracks staring at the street before him in a daze. The ultimate blind battle. Amazing prize money. An extraordinary challenge for experts. No light, no smell, no color, no shadow. Masked blind battle. The 50,000 yuan prize money is waiting for you. A wild blind battle. A different kind of fight, a different kind of challenge. The multitude of swaying, colorful banners made Ai Hui's eyes cross. Every single training hall had one hanging outside its entrance, advertising their very own blind battle. He was dumbstruck. What was going on? As if hearing his thoughts, Lu Lan explained, "I remember it was 2 weeks ago that the Shi Clan Training Hall organized a blind battle competition with a reward of 1 million yuan. It caused an uproar and many went down to register. Soon after, almost every other training hall followed suit, making blind battling the most popular challenge in Central Pine City. 2 days ago, as I was getting groceries, I even heard people say that the blind battling trend was no longer confined to this city, spreading out to many other cities." How amazing! Lu Lan spoke with relish, as if it was an honorable thing. Ai Hui regained his senses, the excitement growing in his face. The way he took in the scene in front of him was how a hungry wolf would eye a fresh, juicy lamb. Oh, no. A whole herd of them. He had noticed from the previous competition that the other contestants were unused to dark conditions. Like this, in a blind combat, his fighting power's potential could be unleashed perfectly, while on the other hand, his opponents would be suppressed and at a great disadvantage. This battle was made for him. Ai Hui grinned, exposing his snow-white canines, ready to attack. His heart was set, except for the Shi Clan Training Hall's blind battle, he was going to participate in every competition available. "Thank you, Shi Clan Training Hall. How kind." He happened to glance at the Shi Clan Training Hall and noticed a young lady at its entrance amongst the crowd. Like him, she stood in a daze staring at all of the advertisements. After a while, her shock was overtaken by a coldness that bleached her face of all color. Even from far away, Ai Hui could sense her rage. Wow, 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 this expression. Too vivid. As if sensing Ai Hui's mocking gaze, the lady turned and glared at him before stomping angrily into the Shi clan training hall. Ai Hui, comparatively, felt this world was full of hope. His body burned with passion, ready to fight. His purse was unbearably hungry and thirsty. Lu Lan, let's start. Lu Lan was momentarily stunned. Start what? Earning money. Like a soldier marching into war, Ai Hui majestically strode into a training hall. Chapter 26. The first when you are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Irene Editor. Lise Lu Lan stood in front of the stage, feeling extremely nervous. The mask on his face concealed it well, but his tightly clenched fist gave it away. While he was a stranger to battling, even he could tell that the situation on stage was subtly and abnormally dangerous. With a single moment's carelessness, anyone would be knocked down immediately. On stage, Ai Hui used a simple yet exceptionally fierce technique to take the last contestant down. Lu Lan, who had been tense from the start, suddenly jumped up and cheered loudly with both arms raised. Ai Hui got down from the platform with a few bruises and 10,000 yuan. You're too amazing. Lu Lan's eyes shone brightly with unending respect for Ai Hui. Ever since his creation, his daily life revolved around the same routine. Shopping for groceries, cleaning the rooms, and learning Master Xiao's designated lessons like medicine. Fighting was a novelty to him. His first time launching a fist at anyone was when Ai Hui had taught him. And now, for the first time, he witnessed his first battle today. It was so intense that he felt breathless, completely forgetting that breathing was unnecessary for a sand puppet. Affected by the stifling atmosphere, his eyes stayed glued to the match in total concentration. His current lifestyle was peaceful and repetitive, and he had never thought to question it until today, when he suddenly felt that something was missing from his life. He never thought it a bad thing in the past, until today. He suddenly felt that something was missing from his life. His gaze fell onto Ai Hui's face. There were a few bruises on it, making it look somewhat pitiful. Ai Hui, however, was not bothered in the slightest. His bruised face carried a trace of firm austerity, as if nothing could obstruct him. His gaze was determined, the light in them not bright like the stars but rather deep and reserved. Their depths were cold and distant like the faraway horizon when the morning sun had yet to rise. BDNVL.M Lu Lan's emotions were stirred. He felt a different kind of ice-cold passion from Ai Hui. It was a passion that never died out in spite of this dull life. A lonely passion that fought on through difficult times. Ai Hui's silence was like the deep, dark sky, waiting quietly for the next break of day. Lu Lan realized then what he was missing. It was this very passion for living. His own life and fate had already been decided, and he had no choice but to abide by these commands. Lu Lan knew these thoughts were senseless. He was a sand puppet, he reminded himself. Ai Hui noticed Lu Lan's gaze and assumed it was for the bruises on his face. He said carelessly, "I'm fine, they're all small injuries." Such superficial wounds look scarier than they actually are. As they made their way out, someone yelled from behind, "If you're capable, stay where you are. Let's have another match." It was the last contestant defeated by Ai Hui. Unwilling to accept his defeat, he came to the conclusion that it was due to his carelessness. Seeing that fellow's coarse techniques that seemed to come from street gangsters made him even more unwilling to admit his loss to such a guy. Lu Lan stopped, but Ai Hui said while walking onward, "Ignore him. Spineless. Good. Nothing, coward." Flustered, the contestant continued his verbal assault. One after another, the other defeated contestants started chiming in, also feeling that their loss was unfathomable. He had an accidental win. You can't count on him being so lucky every time. Scram. Lu Lan took offense. How could these people act like that when they shouldn't? They clearly lost, how dare they spill such ugly insults? After a while, Lu Lan noticed Ai Hui's lack of reaction and asked, Ai Hui, aren't you angry? Don't you want to go back and beat them up? What's there to be angry about? Ai Hui casually plucked a blade of grass from the roadside and put it into his mouth. In the wilderness, they're all dead. Lu Lan fell into a daze. He found it difficult to describe the feeling he felt upon hearing Ai Hui's words. They were steady and confident, yet also tinged by a slight melancholy. Out of curiosity, he asked, have you been in the wilderness? Yes. Ai Hui chewed on the grass. Stayed in there for 3 years. How awesome. Lu Lan felt deep veneration for him. To Lu Lan, the wilderness was a mysterious and faraway place. The thought of leaving Central Pine City had never even occurred to him, and the only understanding he had of the wilderness came from books. He was aware from the descriptions that danger lurked in every corner, but he did not know the sort of difficulties that had to be endured to stay there for 3 years. Ai Hui was so amazing. At this point, Lu Lan was full of admiration for Ai Hui. He believed that in this world, the most powerful man was Master Shao, followed by Ai Hui. Oh, wrong. Both were powerful in different ways, so they should both be ranked first. Where are we going now? Lu Lan thought of the 10,000 Ai Hui had just won and felt happiness bubble up at once. Next hall, Ai Hui responded factly. The next one. You want to continue? Lu Lan was startled. Such a good opportunity. Ai Hui involuntarily licked his lips and narrowed his eyes. He was like a wild beast that marked its prey and was ready to pounce. Lu Lan was unsure why he felt a chill in his heart upon seeing Ai Hui's expression. As expected from an expert who stayed in the wilderness, Ai Hui had such a murderous spirit. It made Lu Lan curious about us know what the wilderness was like. They walked into the second training hall and were drowned in the clamor. It was not unreasonable for blind battling to become a trend since it was a new mode of competition that proved to be a new challenge for people. This foreign method of fighting was highly unpredictable as it added a new variable besides skills. It was not uncommon to see practitioners with 4 palaces to be defeated by those with 2. Even those with unsurpassable skills had to be careful on stage. A moment of neglect could result in failure. Under such circumstances, past experiences were useless, and everyone became so clumsy it was even funny. When Ai Hui walked in, a contestant on stage was being manhandled by an opponent who had no idea what he was grabbing onto. As he hurriedly applied force, the contestant's pants were pulled down, revealing his white, fleshy buttocks. Those before the stage shrieked with laughter, their loud screams and whistles on the verge of making the roof collapse. In such an environment, Ai Hui's facial expression was exceptionally jarring. He seemed to have overlooked the contestant's shining, white bum and instead seriously observed the battle while scanning the other contestants on stage. Everyone had opaque masks on their faces, but what interested Ai Hui even more was the fact that it was a partnered team battle. If only Fatty was here, Ai Hui thought subconsciously. He continued his solemn observation before he internally shook his head. There was no teamwork whatsoever between the contestants. Ai Hui could not help but wish again for Fatty to be here. If they combined their powers, their chances of victory were high. He glanced over the rules hanging on the signboard. Interested parties had to sign up in 2s. Another hall. But Ai Hui felt somewhat adamant in joining. He looked to the side, only to see Lu Lan highly engrossed in the match. His heart stirred. Or, should he let Lu Lan try? Chapter 27. My Sand Puppet. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Irene Editor. Pranav, Lu Lan, do you want to try? AI Hui turned his head and suddenly asked. Try. Lu Lan reiterated vacantly, try what? To go on stage and fight. Go on stage. And fight. Lu Lan's eyes widened, and then he shouted, AI Hui, do you mean for me to go on stage and join the competition? AI Hui, who had been perfectly composed, was startled by Lu Lan's sudden outburst. He calmed his heart before replying, yes. It says here that a team of 2 is required to participate. If you don't feel like, then. Okay, Lu Lan answered straightforwardly, but he was not without any hesitation. But I have never been in a fight. What if we lose? Then we move on to the next one, AI Hui replied matter-of-factly. Win some, lose some. There's nothing wrong. You can take it as practice. His words eliminated Lu Lan's worry. However, when he tried to register, the manager plainly rejected him. Sand puppets are not allowed. They are not human, so they do not see with their eyes. Isn't that cheating? AI Hui could not argue with that. Yes, it was entirely true that sand puppets were not humans, in fact, they were both remarkably different. They judged situations differently and did not have similar physiological mechanisms. Some sand puppets had an acute sense of smell, while others possessed the ability of reptiles to detect opponents' positions through heat. Some even possessed the ability of bats to locate opponents through sound waves. Throughout his life, AI Hui had encountered all kinds of sand puppets, and he had gradually come to realize that many Earth elementalists would create and modify their sand puppets to an unimaginable extent. Although the majority of Earth elementalists were eccentric, antisocial, and dislikable, no one could ignore their impressive presence on the battlefield, and it was chiefly because of their sand puppets that they were often deemed as the most dangerous of people. AI Hui felt like informing the manager that Lu Lan definitely had no such abilities, but in the end, he did not. Lu Lan was the weakest sand puppet that AI Hui had ever met. He could not see how Lu Lan could have possibly been designed for battling. In his opinion, Lu Lan was a sand puppet that was purely constructed for lifestyle. When AI Hui saw Lu Lan's bright eyes dim, he patted his back and faintly murmured, "Let's go." As they walked outside of the hall, Lu Lan looked down and kept silent. AI Hui, having sensed Lu Lan's disappointment, started to silently think to himself. Lu Lan seemed to be really anticipating the opportunity to battle on stage, but as a sand puppet, he obviously had an advantage over the rest in such a blind battle. The training hall would never let him up on stage, unless. AI Hui's eyes suddenly lit up, he had an idea. He glanced over the signs of the surrounding training halls before setting his eyes on one of them and charging in its direction. This way, Lu Lan. AI Hui brought Lu Lan into another training hall and headed straight to the registration counter. I want to sign up. The staff looked pointedly at Lu Lan. He's my sand puppet, AI Hui claimed, before hurriedly adding, I'm an Earth elementalist. Can I bring him along to compete? Lu Lan, who was standing behind, was shocked. Earth elementalist. Then yes, you can. The staff nodded, it was clearly not his first time in such a situation. But your sand puppet is required to seal all sensing techniques and disconnect all telepathic communication. Also, fogging grass would have to be stuck onto him, and if it falls off, then you will instantly lose. Are you still interested in participating? AI Hui was secretly delighted, indeed, it was just as he had expected. Sand puppets were the most important aspect of Earth elementalists' fighting abilities. Without them, Earth elementalists were no different than sheep awaiting slaughter. Unless Earth elementalists were prohibited from participating, which was highly unlikely because they made up a big community, training halls would have to use different methods to suppress and neutralize the natural advantages of sand puppets. However, although AI Hui had guessed at the possible preventive measures, he had never imagined that they would be so fierce. Fogging grass was concocted only by wood elementalists, and despite being non-toxic itself, it was used extensively in setting traps and making poison. However, since its most significant use was to interfere with their sensing techniques, it was used specifically to deal with sand puppets and had hence become hated by all of them. This was especially true for lower-level sand puppets, as the soul-fogging grass affected them significantly. In fact, it would suppress practically all of their sensing techniques. Without their sensing techniques and their telepathic communication, these lower-level sand puppets were basically useless. Ai Hui mused to himself that this was probably the reason for such harsh methods. Lu Lan swiftly responded, "No problem." On hearing Lu Lan's reply, the staff was slightly taken aback. "Looks like you have an intelligent puppet." He laughed. "Intelligent sand puppets have a great advantage." Good luck to you both." Ai Hui knew that the man was correct. Without the ability to sense and receive orders, the sand puppet's own judgments were being put to the test. That was why intelligent sand puppets could be said to have an advantage. How rare. Lu Lan actually had an advantage here. The staff produced a blade of emerald green soul-fogging grass and handed it over to Lu Lan. This was the first time Ai Hui had seen a full blade of soul-fogging grass, and it somewhat reminded him of a bean sprout. Lu Lan stuck the soul-fogging grass onto his head. Ai Hui was unable to contain his laughter. Lu Lan's head was made of sand, and now with a blade of grass sticking out, it was as if a bean had sprouted on it. The sight was indescribably amusing. Lu Lan noticed Ai Hui's peculiar expression and started to have some doubts. "Did I stick it in the wrong place?" "It's very good," Ai Hui reassured him, before commenting, "You look fresh." After registering, they both stood aside to wait for the commencement of the next match. Ai Hui took this chance to impart some last-minute knowledge to Lu Lan. "Do not panic when you get up there and are unable to see anything. Do not stray far from me or I can't help you. Do not panic as well if you encounter an attack. Remember, you're a sand puppet and can transform. Come, let's create a warning signal. We shall use the sound of grinding sand. Do not be too noisy, just make it loud enough for me to hear. Stop talking once you get on the stage to prevent others locating your position. The moment you decide to attack, do not hesitate. Do you still recall the techniques we practiced together that night? Remember, if you fail to attack, move away immediately. The best solution is to roll on the spot. Remember, you are a sand puppet. You can flow towards the ground, and even flow on top of it. Ai Hui, don't describe me as if I am urine. I am a sand puppet." Lu Lan resentfully corrected him, "Not a water puppet." "Something like that." Ai Hui chuckled dryly. "In any case, I will help you, so relax, rookie. This is the first battle of your life. From today onwards, you will be a sand puppet with combat experience. You will remember this day. But if it hurts too much, don't forget to surrender." "Got it," Lu Lan replied honestly. "Get ready to go on stage," the staff called out. "It's our turn." Ai Hui encouragingly patted Lu Lan's shoulder. "You can do it, my soup." Brewing gem. Lu Lan did not notice the strange name Ai Hui had called him. His tone revealed some nervousness, as he began, "Ai Hui. Dong. Dong. Dong." The reverberations of the bell spread throughout the hall. Ai Hui's gaze sharpened instantly, he seemed to transform into an entirely different person. With steady hands, he wore the opaque mask. Chapter 28. Lu Lan's suspicion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Irene Editor. Pranav. When Lu Lan put the training hall's mask on his face, he realized that he was actually wearing 2 layers of masks. It was an entirely original experience, just like how, at this very moment, he was standing on a stage in front of an audience. While buying his usual groceries, he had passed by many training halls, seen many banners promoting blind battling, and had even heard many discussing it as well. However, before today, he had never imagined that he would someday be standing on a stage and participating in a blind battle. He truly would never have dreamed of it. Yet the reality was right in front of his eyes. A battle awaited him, either he or his enemies would prevail. However, Lu Lan had a belly full of doubts. He wanted to tell Ai Hui that this situation was somewhat different to what the staff had described. He reached upwards and lightly brushed his hand against the soul-fogging grass. What he had wanted to tell Ai Hui earlier, before he had been rudely interrupted by his own thoughts, was that the soul-fogging grass seemed to have no effect on his ability to detect people. He could still see them. Lu deemed it weird. He was familiar with the soul-fogging grass, and according to what he had learned, it really should have been able to restrain his powers. But then why was he still able to see others? This was the first time that he had noticed that his body was different, but he could discern it only because of this blind battle and the blade of soul-fogging grass stuck on his head. Lower-level sand puppets were significantly affected by the soul-fogging grass. Could it be that he was not one of them? Lu Lan felt that that was impossible. When a low-level sand puppet was perfectly adequate for cooking and cleaning, why would a high-level one be required? It was much more likely that his abnormalities were because of Master Xiao's experiments. Master Xiao was fascinated with research. Whenever he gained inspiration, he would immediately test it out on Lu Lan. However, these experiments had often led to problems arising in Lu Lan's body. For instance, during the time he had first met Ai Hui, his core had malfunctioned, and hence his body had started to fall apart. Maybe it was some kind of new technology. He reminded himself to ask Master Xiao when he returned home. In reality, the soul-fogging grass was not completely ineffective, his field of vision was affected, and his surroundings had become much blurrier. Lu Lan also found out, that unexpectedly, the opaque mask on his face had the most noticeable impact. Had he been using his eyes to observe the outside world? How strange. Lu Lan was surprised, he really had not expected this. Sand puppets seldom used their eyes to observe the world because Earth elementalists, with their exquisite techniques and colorful experiences, knew that their sight would be greatly impaired. Under Master Xiao's meticulous guidance, Lu Lan had come to understand a lot about sand puppets. However, Lu Lan had never examined his own body and had never realized that it had so many unique qualities. When he thought about it, Lu Lan felt relieved. Master Xiao had never been one to abide by conventions. It would have been odd if he had been like other sand puppets. Lu Lan suddenly noticed that during the short moment he had been distracted, Ai Hui had already initiated contact with an opponent. Ai Hui strangely groped in the dark, his legs were apart in a half-dot squat, while both his arms were spread out and open, like a crab's pincers. That's right. Ai Hui's posture was remarkably similar to that of a crab. Ai Hui's movements were silent. His saws were like those of a cat, uncannily inaudible. How amazing! Lu Lan inwardly exclaimed with admiration. Compared to Ai Hui, his opponent seemed much more amateurish. Even Lu Lan could tell that the latter's movements carried a tinge of panic. The sight made Lu Lan recall scenes of wild beasts hunting. Ai Hui was like a slowly advancing wild beast, and his opponent was like an alarmed, fidgety prey. Suddenly, while Ai Hui was in a crouching position, his palm made contact with his opponent's waist. At the moment of contact, both parties reacted simultaneously. The opponent's first response was to immediately direct a punch towards Ai Hui, but contrary to his expectations, Ai Hui was in a half-dot squat. The punch flew past Ai Hui's head and struck empty air. Ai Hui's attack was much more effective. The moment he felt his opponent's waist, Ai Hui instantly reacted by swiftly gripping onto it and pulling it close. He then borrowed this momentum to thrust himself sideways and lunge for his opponent's calf. The force, when compiled from top and bottom, momentarily threw Ai Hui's opponent off balance and prompted him to fall towards Ai Hui. AI Hui subsequently displayed his astonishing combat techniques. Like a nimble python, he did not retreat, and instead went forward and smoothly wrapped himself around his target. AI Hui's feet shoved against his opponent's chin. His opponent, who had his hands crushed behind his back, was quickly immobilized before passing out after 20 seconds. The referee, who had long since been watching from the sidelines, rolled out a snake-like whip and wrapped it around the unconscious contestant, before expertly pulling him off the stage. An experienced doctor swiftly attended to him, and it was only after a short while that he indicated that the contestant was all right. Although the contestant was not injured, the incident had made the two referees tense up. Their expressions quickly turned serious. That Earth Elementalist was too relentless. Yes, his sand puppet did not move at all. An Earth Elementalist who can fight is quite rare. It's unsurprising, actually. Earth Elementalists are a group of abnormal fellows. The abnormality is normal for them. That's true. Even though they both were idly chatting, their gazes remained completely fixed on the stage. The members of the audience were absolutely silent. They were shocked by AI Hui's sharp and fierce attack. AI Hui's previous move was neither dazzling or exceedingly elaborate. In fact, he did not even engage his elemental energy. However, it had made the audience feel the scent of fresh blood waft towards them. It carried with it a sense of sharp danger. During the past several days, in the various training halls, they had witnessed all types of contestants with their unique fighting styles. Some were meticulous, some were eccentric and hilarious, while others were disorganized and acted without thinking. However, no match came close to the scene that had just unfolded in front of them. It had stunned them greatly. A few seconds later, everyone came to their senses, and a commotion broke out off stage. How fierce! Too handsome. What's that move called? Anyone knows? Are you kidding me? So ferocious, and he's an Earth Elementalist. How is anyone else going to win? It's okay, it's okay. Hey, look at his sand puppet. Doesn't it look silly? The usual moves in previous competitions were all flowery and fancy, yet highly impractical and weak. However, upon witnessing AI Hui's violent and sharp move, everyone's interest was immediately piqued, because it was much more unique. Lu Lan stared blankly at AI Hui as he stood on the stage, dumbfounded. Unlike Lu Lan, the observers downstage were far away from the action, and so their reactions were less surreal. However, the moment AI Hui had launched his attack, Lu Lan had felt his heart skip a beat. After taking down the contestant, AI Hui immediately started to quietly grope around as he stealthily advanced towards the next one. The remaining opponent's earlier movements had inadvertently revealed his position. As AI Hui continued to feel around for the next target, Lu Lan couldn't help but widen his eyes. He was afraid of not catching all the details. As an utterly inexperienced combatant, he had already forgotten his purpose of being on stage. He was completely immersed in AI Hui's battle and was incredibly tense. The audience observed AI Hui as he locked onto a new prey. Everyone held their breaths with their eyes wide open. A blanket of silence had descended upon the training hall yet again. AI Hui was unaware of what was happening outside. The training hall had used a special method to soundproof the stage. Like a cautious wild beast with a silent bloodlust, he carefully and patiently approached his target. However, at that very moment, an unforeseen event suddenly occurred. Chapter 29. Zhu Yan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Irene. Editor. Pranav. A thread of fire had been ignited under AI Hui's feet. Not good. AI Hui's expression changed slightly as he instinctively dodged to the side. At that instant, with a smooth flip of the opponent's palm, AI Hui's former location was set ablaze. The contestant had not anticipated AI Hui's quick reaction, which ultimately led to the unexpected failure of his well-disguised attack. AI Hui, who had just barely managed to escape the column of fire, shot into the air like a cannon's projectile and charged towards his opponent. The latter was an expert in long-range attacks and had much stronger elemental energy. Only by getting closer would AI Hui stand a chance to win. If AI Hui's previous attack had been soundless with hidden killing intent, then this lunge had thoroughly displayed his imposing and incomparably sharp bloodlust. Sensing that AI Hui was rapidly approaching, the opponent instinctively tensed up. This was precisely AI Hui's strategy: to launch a psychological attack. Any trace of panic from the enemy was favorable to him. However, his opponent then made a very strange move. He got into a handstand position. Lu Lan, who had been watching carefully, broke out in a cold sweat. This was bad. At that moment, the opponent's palms became enveloped in a blazing ball of flame. The dark red fire spread through the air like flowing kerosene. This was. Lu Lan felt that the scene was familiar. He had seen it somewhere before, but he could not recall anything due to his extreme nervousness. Flaming heavenly spider transformation. A member of the audience cried out in alarm. Zhu Yan. Oh my God. Zhu Yan came. That remark caused quite a stir within the audience. Everyone was pleasantly surprised. Zhu Yan was an expert from Central Wind City. Although its school district was a year ahead, it was the nearest city to Central Pine City, and hence experts from both sides were quite familiar with one another. Zhu Yan's base level was not considered high as he had only activated 2 palaces. However, he had quickly risen to fame once he had succeeded in learning the absolute art, flaming heavenly spider transformation. Elemental energy techniques had been in development for over 1,000 years, but there were only a few which could be acknowledged as absolute arts. Absolute arts formed the foundation of a family clan. For example, Zhu family clans. Flaming heavenly spider transformation was created only after generations of esoteric perfection and gradual, continuous improvement. However, when compared to the skills of the supreme manuals that had been passed down from the cultivation era, these absolute arts could be considered very young and new. Every family clan within the Avalon of 5 Elements knew this exceedingly well, and hence no one dared to show disrespect and ignore their ancestors' contributions. Since the Zhu family's lineage was predominantly predisposed to the fire attribute, this absolute art perfectly suited them. However, due to the exceptionally high level of understanding that was required, mastering it was extremely tough, and so the number of descendants of each generation of the Zhu family who had managed to successfully learn flaming heavenly spider transformation had never exceeded 3. This had been the situation for many successive generations. Unfortunately, it was like an ironclad law which never changed. Flaming heavenly spider transformation was very hard to comprehend, but once it was understood, along with constant perfection and accumulation of elemental energy, one could smoothly become an expert. Zhu Yan was the first amongst his generation to understand flaming heavenly spider transformation. The Zhu family was a prominent clan of the Avalon of 5 Elements, and the name of its greatest genius was naturally well known far and wide. Therefore, as soon as the spiderweb-like fire net had lit up the stage, Zhu Yan's origin had been swiftly recognized. The audience started to grow increasingly excited. It was not often that they could witness a fight with a talent like Zhu Yan. They were full of curiosity. To be called an absolute art, exactly how powerful was flaming heavenly spider transformation? The manager of the training hall was smiling so much that his chin could not be seen. The appearance of an expert like Zhu Yan was a big boost to his business. They were just missing Xuanhuan. If only he could invite her from the nearby Shi clan training hall, then the doorstep to his training hall would be broken from being trampled on by the throngs of people who would come to watch. Everyone was holding their breaths and gaping at the scene on the stage. They were waiting to witness the magnificent show that Zhu Yan was about to put on. AI Hui's attack was as fast as lightning. The moment Zhu Yan had gotten into the handstand position, AI Hui's fist was already flying through the air. Zhu Yan's heart trembled. His opponent's reaction had been much faster than he had expected. With both his palms planted firmly on the ground, everything within his surroundings was under Zhu Yan's control, and he could clearly sense the power of AI Huey's punch. His opponent did not use any elemental energy, but the force of this blow was so outstandingly powerful that he could only have launched such a ferocious attack by compiling all of the energy from throughout his whole body. If this punch made contact, Zhu Yan felt that it would be best not to try. His reaction wasn't slow either. With a slight drop of his wrist, his body curved backwards like a bent bow. With a burst of energy from his waist and abdomen, he tensed his right, pencil-straight leg and filled it with elemental power. The blaze rose dramatically, and like a flaming heavy axe plummeting down from the heavens, it filled the air with a red color. A fist and a leg violently collided. Bang! An explosion rang out, and sparks could be seen flying through the air. AI Hui only felt the rebound of an enormous wave of energy before he was sent soaring backward. Zhu Yan also retreated with his palms by many huge steps before stabilizing himself. Lu Lan was suddenly jerked back into reality, and without thinking, he rushed towards AI Hui. Zhu Yan coolly looked on as his opponent's sand puppet saved his master. The raging energy and blood inside of his chest only soothed after a while. AI Huey's earlier punch was similarly unpleasant for him. He had really not expected that his opponent would have such strength. What was the most bewildering, however, was that his opponent did not engage any elemental energy in his attack. Throwing such a fierce punch with just pure muscle strength, who was he? Was there such an expert in Central Pine City? Could it be that he, too, was an expert from another city who came because of the news? Central Pine City's blind battles had become well known in the vicinity, and being so close to Central Pine City, Central Wind City was naturally interested in the battles as well. Although the training halls within Central Wind City had already started to organize a few battles, they fell behind in terms of creativity. When people had time for leisure, they would take the short trip down to Central Pine City for some entertainment. While Zhu Yan was pondering over AI Huey's identity, the flying AI Hui had already been caught by Lu Lan. AI Hui looked a tad pitiful. His right hand was hanging down unnaturally by his side, and his fist was even burnt black. It was evident that the exchange had been quite damaging to him. Without even needing to check, Lu Lan could distinguish that AI Hui's right arm was broken. Lu Lan remorsefully blamed himself. He had boldly claimed that he would assist AI Hui, but he had not been of any help at all. However, Lu Lan honestly had no idea how to handle Zhu Yan. Although he had recognized flaming heavenly spider transformation, it was of no use to the battle. Due to his lack of combat experience, Lu Lan was unable to come up with any solution at this time. AI Hui was like a battle god in the eyes of Lu Lan, but even then, he was not the enemy's match. There was now only one solution. "Let's surrender," Lu Lan said honestly. Contestants that were on the stage could not hear noises from outside, but the members of the audience could clearly hear everything that was being said on stage. The audience roared with laughter upon hearing Lu Lan's words. "Ha ha ha. Is this a sand puppet? Ha ha ha. This is the first time I've heard a sand puppet persuading his owner to surrender. Ha ha. Too funny. I can't stand it anymore. No, let me laugh, ha ha ha. Hey hey hey, you are a sand puppet. You're not supposed to submit even if it means death. You're supposed to sacrifice yourself and give your owner a chance to live. Ha 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 ha." Chapter 30. Advisor. Type sand puppet. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Irene. Editor. Pranav. AI Hui was not the least bit surprised by Lu Lan's actions. Lu Lan was purely a lifestyle sand puppet and an inexperienced battler, and behaving appropriately in his first competition was already an incredible feat. The smarter the sand puppet was, the more affected it would be by its state of mind. On the other hand, low-level sand puppets, which had a much lower intelligence, could only follow orders blindly and emotionlessly. That was the reason why many Earth elementalists did not prefer intelligent sand puppets. The smarter they were, the more human-like they would become. They would have a greater sense of self-awareness and would independently judge many things for themselves. Battle-type sand puppets were usually less intelligent. If they were like humans, who felt emotions like fear and anxiety, then they would become timid during fights, which was something that the Earth Elementalists, who had the desire to build slaughter machines, disliked the most. However, the world is full of contradictions. Intelligence could also be said to be a quality that a killing machine should possess. Understanding how to make the right decision at the right time was undoubtedly the most important prerequisite of a top-notch slaughter machine. Lu Lan was very intelligent, which was exactly the cause of his troubles during his first battle. However, the current situation was not that bad. Lu Lan had not lost his head out of fear. Instead, he had persuaded Ai Hui to surrender, which was, in actuality, the right choice, considering the skill levels of both the contestants. He is using Flaming Heavenly Spider Transformation, which is an absolute art, Lu Lan whispered. His base level should only be of 2 palaces, but his Flaming Heavenly Spider Transformation has already managed to unlock Hellfire Spider Web. There's no way we can win. The audience's previous reaction to Lu Lan's persuasion was to laugh, but these words sent them into shock. Don't tell me he's an advisor-type sand puppet. He actually knows Flaming Heavenly Spider Transformation. He's an advisor-type sand puppet. Such an intelligent sand puppet, this is an advisor-type sand puppet. What day is it today? Not only did an absolute art appear, but an advisor-type sand puppet showed itself. The members of the audience discussed in hushed voices, they were all bewildered. Sand puppets had been in development for over 1,000 years, and there were bound to be many unusual and bizarre types of sand puppets that would be invented. To the majority of people, Earth Elementalists were solitary and unique, and so the fact that they had strange temperaments was entirely natural. In fact, they even believed that it would be embarrassing to be called an Earth Elementalist if one had an overly normal character. Advisor-type sand puppets were incredibly rare. Not only did they require a high intelligence and capacity for learning, but they had to also remain calm during times of danger and recommend the most valuable solutions. In addition to being exceedingly troublesome to make, advisor-type also had high requirements, and much more was expected from them than other sand puppets. They were also very weak and would easily become a constant target in the battlefield, shortening their lifespans drastically. Of course, Earth Elementalists were usually conceited when it came to their abilities and wisdom, and so they only used their sand puppets to complete odd jobs and ensure their safety. Thus, they did not favor advisor-type sand puppets. However, to elementalists of other attributes, advisor-type sand puppets were their favorites, especially to those who had fists but no brains. These sand puppets had much better learning abilities compared to humans because they did not need to sleep and could untiringly and unceasingly study and absorb knowledge. Who wouldn't want a smart companion? It was due to this that the market price for an advisor-type sand puppet had always remained sky-high. Out of everyone present in the training hall, the one who was enjoying the most was definitely the boss of the training hall. First, the Zhu family's absolute art, Flaming Heavenly Spider Transformation, had appeared, and then all of a sudden, that foolish-looking sand puppet was possibly an advisor-type puppet. He felt as if he had won the lottery twice in a day and was simply over the moon. Ai Hui had originally planned to retreat. As Lu Lan had mentioned, the disparity in their skills was too big. He had no chance of victory. He had came here only for the money. Since this opportunity was gone, he could just move on to the next training hall. After all, he was not one to care about the results of a fight. However, upon hearing Lu Lan mention that his opponent had engaged in absolute art, Ai Hui immediately changed his mind. He had stayed in the wilderness for 3 years and had met many strong elementalists, but there were none who possessed an absolute art. However, he had witnessed the yearning in the faces of eminent elementalists whenever they spoke about absolute arts. Ai Hui was unaware of how Lu Lan had managed to identify his opponent's move as an absolute art, but he trusted Lu Lan completely. Ever since they had become acquainted, Lu Lan had never spoken any unreliable words and, moreover, he had never spoken without thinking. An opportunity was right before his eyes. There would be no better chance than this. Blind battling was a competition, and contestants did not have to worry about losing their lives, even if they lost on stage. To be able to fight in a competition, rather than on a battlefield, and to get to witness an absolute art, how could it be better than that? Ai Hui started to become stimulated when he thought of this rare opportunity. Although his right arm was numb, it was as if incessant energy was flowing throughout his whole body. Go down first. I'll join you soon. Behind his mask, Ai Hui licked his lips. He then turned towards Zhu Yan and crouched down slightly. Lu Lan did not understand why Ai Hui would reject his suggestion. Ai Hui should have been able to assess the situation, right? Their skill levels differed too much, and it was evident that he stood no chance of winning. However, since Ai Hui had chosen to continue battling, he also had no reason to retreat. He suddenly recalled his previous observation. There was an intense passion, which he had never seen before, in Ai Hui. The type of ardor that he would never possess. At most, he would just be broken and scattered. Lu Lan repeatedly consoled himself. He stood beside Ai Hui with his core fully operating, continuously racking his memory for relevant information concerning flaming heavenly spider transformation. Ai Hui had not expected Lu Lan to remain, but he did not argue against it. Unlike others, Ai Hui believed that this was an equally excellent opportunity for Lu Lan. Being able to witness an absolute art during his first battle was enviably honorable. Ai Hui did not even consider as to whether or not the newcomer would suffer from a mental blow or setback. Compared to the wilderness, where blood was splattered everywhere and mangled flesh could be seen at every corner, a competition like this was simply too gentle and heartwarming. Although Lu Lan bravely stood by Ai Hui, he did not know what posture to adopt, and eventually ended up looking like a clumsy penguin. Stars filled the eyes of the girls downstage as they held their hands against their bosoms. Such a cute sand puppet. It looks so silly. I want one. There were others, however, who were more experienced, and they shook their heads one after the other. An advisor. Type sand puppet entering real combat, wasn't that simply courting death? It seemed like this advisor. Type sand puppet was not of a high grade because otherwise, he would have a higher IQ and would not behave so foolishly. It was even more plausible that everyone had guessed incorrectly, and he was not even an advisor. Type sand puppet at all. The scarlet-red flaming net on the ground resembled an enormous spider web, and Zhu Yan, at the center, resembled a spider. Under the influence of his absolute art, he was cognizant of every movement within the hall. Yet, currently, he was only interested in the fellow with whom he just had a fistfight with. Zhu Yan also became a little excited upon realizing that his opponent had not left. He might as well give his opponent a moment to rest. He took advantage of his fire net to sweep the other competitors, similar to the autumn gales that sweep away the fallen leaves, off the stage. At this point, Ai Hui could spare no time for Lu Lan. All his attention was centered on his opponent, he was aware of nothing else.